Hello everybody and welcome to the We Compatriots half-term review. Now let me tell you a little bit about the We Compatriots. It's a group of young Nigerians who are passionate about the country and who are passionate about educating other Nigerians about all we need to know about politics and governance so that we can create the country that we all dream of. So why are we here? Well, in 2015, Nigeria achieved political history, so to speak. We voted out an incumbent president. Now, the administration that came in after came in on a wave of goodwill, most of it bolstered by some very, very interesting promises, almost 70 in total. 2 years later, we're taking a look back at that administration and all its promises. We're looking at all the things that have happened since then, and we're going to try and draw a line from now, 2 years into the future, and hopefully many, many years ahead. It's going to be a very interesting conversation, and I have two people who will make this very, very enlightening, and I have been warned, very fiery. On my right, I should start with the troublemaker in the house. let's just get it out of the way from the beginning. I have Zeal Akaraiwe. Now, he's a financial advisor, he's a risk management consultant, and he apparently knows a lot about money, which is good.
It helps.
It helps, right?
It helps.
On my left, this man is deceptively calm. If you follow him on social media, you know that this is a facade. His name is Ofili Okechukwu. He's an author and the founder and CEO of Okada Books, and it's good to finally meet you.
Yes, same here.
So we're going to talk about the current administration. 2 years after 2015, promises have been made, have they been kept? And we're going to break it down into sectors so that it's not overwhelming. We'll talk about the national security, we'll talk about the economy, we'll talk about power, about education, social welfare, and healthcare. So let us start off with the one that it was part of the administration's biggest push, security.
Yes.
Boko Haram was ravaging the country. We were pushing them out. There was so much going on. And we got some very, very strong promises. Let me remind us of a couple. We were promised that the administration would maintain territorial integrity of Nigeria and ensure that the Chibok girls were rescued and reunited with their families. We were promised a Marshall Plan on insurgency, terrorism, ethnic and religious violence, kidnapping and banditry. We were promised that the armed forces would be provided with state-guaranteed life insurance and welfare packages, due recognition to acts of heroism. Wait first now, let me finish. To acts of heroism in service to the nation, that the administration would work closely with governors of states affected by the insurgency and also forge closer diplomatic ties with leaders of countries in the region and around the world as well to coordinate efforts to combat that insurgency. We're promised more robust support for security and economic stability of West Africa and special relationship with South Africa and that sub-region as well as other countries outside the continent. We were promised a properly trained and equipped federal anti-terrorism multi-agency task force to destroy Boko Haram. And finally, immediate pay rises and improved conditions for all 5 security services. What do you think?
If Boko Haram was the economy, was Nigeria, I would say the government has earned a debatable A-. Because they've come in and they have taken a bad situation and they've made it much better. They have delivered to a certain degree their promise on bringing the Chibok girls back. Because when Goodluck took over, Buhari was already backtracking because they were like, we don't know whether we can do this and we might not be able to find the girls. But they have, I mean, as of last week. But if you look at national security for what it is, and we kind of had this conversation early on, it is not just Boko Haram. It spreads into other things. And I would just focus on one because there are many others, but on the Fulani herdsmen, it's been a poor response by the government. If you were grading them on the Fulani herdsmen, it would be F for, not Fulani, but F for performance. It has been terrible. And it is not that we're saying that they should go out there and fight Fulani herdsmen. It's just their response to it has been very weak, and it has caused people to think that there's an ethnic bias in the government, because when the Niger Delta were hitting the pipelines and it was affecting power, there was this vociferous.
Yeah.
But when it came to Fulani herdsmen, it was like, well, Buhari doesn't really need to say anything directly and this and that. So it makes people outside of the Boko Haram sphere feel that the government is not really concerned about that national security. So that's what I think on that.
Let me just ask you to hold on a little bit, and let me head over here. What do you think?
I think, well, we got 82 Chibok girls back just in time, as far as I'm concerned, just in time for this show. If that had not happened, we would not be talking about anything, because Buhari himself did say you cannot talk about having decimated or defeated Boko Haram if we do not get all the girls back. Those were his own words. And we do not have all the girls back. So by his own...
if we're going to use his words...
I'm going to use his words. I'm going to use his own rating of himself. We haven't defeated Boko Haram.
The economy. This is fun. This should be fun.
The economy, yes, this should be fun.
Because, I mean, as at when the last administration left, we looked like the golden country of Africa, so to speak. Economy had just been rebased. Largest economy in Africa. We were growing. This was happening. That was happening. And the incoming administration made many promises. I'm just going to give us a few, because there were 20. But there were things like maintaining sound micro and macroeconomic policies, restoring financial confidence in citizens by putting in place a more robust monitoring. You guys need to stop this. Monitoring, supervising, and regulating of financial institutions, make our economy one of the fastest growing in the world, products diversification. It was all very exciting. Where are we now?
Where are we? I think the whole country knows exactly where we are. And what I would like to ask, a very, it's going to be a weird question given our circumstance, but whose promises were these? You see, because I know that the president, what's the word, said he made a different set of promises from what everybody thinks he did. And so whose promises were these? And these promises are not promises that ought to be made. These are things that should be implicit in governance.
So perhaps that we can argue that that was what he was trying to say.
Maybe,
These should be...
I would even be satisfied with that. I would be satisfied with that to the extent that he's doing it. Now, in this regard, some of the promises you're reading out, some are given the circumstances and the excuses they've given, and Ofili mentioned that before, that they did not know the extent. Now, given for me the predictability of the issues we're facing, the obvious systematic decimation of the economy.
You're going to have to break this down.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, not all of us are.
Okay, let me explain. So, there are certain things that are cyclical. Okay? Somebody comes in, he cannot tell you in June he's surprised it rained. It's predictable. I didn't realize it was going to rain, so I didn't come with an umbrella. You would look ridiculous. So, when this administration came in, financial analysts like myself and many others in the papers, on social media, wrote to this government. Some of us wrote personally to people in government, hand delivered those letters. So it's not a question of they didn't know. If they didn't know, we told them what you're doing has predictable outcomes that are not desirable. Did they amend or adjust? They did not.
This government, in 9 months, dropped the value of Naira faster than we ever did in 9 years, right? We're hitting inflation rates.
I have to say, there is an argument that we were already on the path to that. Don't say anything. Continue.
Like he mentioned, people wrote letters, and part of the letters people probably wrote was that we needed to devalue our Naira. And Buhari came on national television and said, someone should tell me why we need to devalue Naira. And in the end, when they devalued the Naira, they did an artificial devaluation of the Naira. Now we have 5 different exchange rates. I don't know, CBN exchange rate is 300. The bank PTA travel rate is 375. When you go to black market, they give you another rate. There are so many rates, and because of, and this is, I go back to the security thing that I said. It's not about sticks and stones. What happens with the economy is that you have to give people confidence that if they are bringing money into your country, that there's some sort of stability.
Which was one of the promises.
And based on their performance, they've been going back and forth. We have 5 different rates. Foreign investors don't have confidence to put ourselves. And the last thing I'll mention about the economy is that the government says one thing and does another thing. It's like Donald Trump on drugs, you know. They came out and said, we need to go off oil and we need to focus on other things. And then all of a sudden they came out again and said they were going to spend millions of dollars to look for oil in the northwest.
In the Chad Basin.
So it's like they are saying one thing and doing another thing. It's not consistent.
I can get from what you're saying that you actually said it, we need to move from an extractive mindset to a manufacturing mindset. Let's stop taking things out of the ground and sending them, and let's actually process them. What do you think we need to do to make our economy better? What promise needs to be addressed here?
The main thing the government needs to focus on is forex. What has happened is that Nigeria, we need to start manufacturing, but to a certain degree, we are going to be dependent on foreign machinery before we transition over. So we need to fix that forex. As bad as it is, we need to fix that forex and then have one.
So fix
value.
forex.
Yes.
That wasn't too bad. Job creation, housing, social welfare. Let's talk, I'm just going to very quickly create a new middle class. 2 million new homeowners in the first year of government, 1 million annually thereafter, national mortgage single-digit interest rate purchases, social welfare program, 5,000 naira for the most vulnerable members of the society, allowances to discharged but unemployed NYSC members, 20,000 jobs per state, including FCT within the first year, 3 million new jobs per year through industrialization, public works, agricultural expansion. I don't like the way you're smiling.
I'm laughing because it's like comedy. It's a joke. The whole thing is a joke because they have not done anything. I think there was one where they said they were going to give us 750,000 jobs in the first year.
20,000 per state plus.
No, but there was one where they said 750,000. Okay, maybe that's
20,000
it.
times 36 plus the
Maybe.
740,000.
It's been bad. I laugh because you clearly know there has been a retraction. People have been laid off from the multinational level.
I don't know.
I know. Okay. I'm quoting reality. We haven't gained any jobs. We've lost, I don't know what the figures are, but we've lost a whole bunch of jobs. People are getting laid off, and people are giving excuses that it's because of the past administration or because of policies of petroleum oil price. But it's been bad. There's nothing really to say we're losing jobs.
This housing crisis, which is, it's obvious we're in a housing crisis, and stop laughing. And the Minister of Power, Housing and Works has talked about creating, housing, the issues involved and so on and so forth. What is our problem? What really is the issue? Because these were, 2 million new homeowners in the first year for a population of over 200 million first is a drop in the bucket. But that's not even happening.
I think let's talk about these promises. These promises that were made. For me, did I reasonably expect them to be met? No. Okay. I did not. So that's why I'm laughing. I can't, it won't be fair to rate you on something I know you didn't really understand when you were making the promise. In the country, we have 25 odd banks. A bank like First Bank has over 700 branches, and yet the entire banking staff strength in the country, all the banks, all the branches, the whole country, is only about less than 400,000. And someone comes and tells me it's going to create 3 million jobs. And I look and I'm like, you need to recreate the entire banking sector in 1 year, expand them. So that just to put, so I knew it's not that it's not possible, but when you tell me 20,000 jobs for each state plus this and 3 million, the very first question is how? Without a how, I can tell you anything. I can tell you anything I like. And holding you accountable for something you are clearly not as knowledgeable about as you should before making the promise is unfair.
Let's talk about healthcare. The government made some very interesting promises, boost local manufacture of pharmaceuticals, make non-adulterated drugs readily available, punish people who are importing or adulterating drugs in the country, enhancing CDC units to meet global standards where disease outbreaks are concerned, universal basic health care, the National Health Act. It's everything that we want our country to go to, healthcare-wise. Where would you say we are? Let's start with you.
If there was, I would give them H for healthcare, but F is where it stops. I think the government has had no focus on healthcare. If there was an Ebola crisis, it would have been terrible. Look at what happened with the meningitis case where people were, Lassa fever, but where people were, I think, selling the drugs or things. It has been bad, and I just don't understand. And I know this is where we talk about the government, but I think we as a people have been terrible at this. I go to hospitals from time to time, and you see doctors that haven't been paid for months.
Yes.
Doctors have been on strike in Benin, Edo State. Nobody talks about it. It's just like business as usual.
Yeah.
So healthcare has been a total failure. I don't even know the healthcare minister's name off the top of my head, and it's just it doesn't even matter. But it's just to show you that they haven't done much on healthcare.
What would you say?
I think the last point I made, my summary, my one sentence on security, dovetails into healthcare, the value of human life. What value do we place on human life? If we don't have a value on human life, we're not going to have a value on healthcare.
Yes.
And so these things add up, and we need a major mind shift. I mean, it's not everything that you lay at the government's feet. I would readily admit that. But really on healthcare, there are some things the citizens cannot do.
Yeah.
I go somewhere and I buy a drug. I cannot verify if it is original or fake or adulterated. That's the government's job.
Because a few years ago, somebody set up a system with a scratch codes that you could text to.
Yes, it works. It still works.
It's still working.
Or is it? If you import drugs, what are you going to tell the manufacturer over there? Hey, we have this scratch code system in Nigeria. we don't have. So it works for some locally manufactured drugs. I've used it. It works, yes. But generally speaking, and they said it, universal health care.
Yes.
Is health care affordable? And again, as we would discuss in many other segments of the country, how does a public official who uses private hospitals, uses a private jet wing, sends his children to private schools, everything in his life is about the private. How can he reasonably relate with the public issues?
Let's talk about education. Let's hope that, I don't know.
You really don't have any bright side to this show, do you?
You never know. You never know. It might pop up.
You talk about comedy, I don't even put it in the government.
But let's talk about education. And there were 15 whole promises made. Promises like establishing new universities of science and technology. They talked about the Almajiri schools, including vocational skills, establishing free tuition and scholarship schemes, technology colleges, more private sector participation, centers of excellence for special education, special purpose funds for secondary school education. There was, again, so many beautiful promises. 20% of our budget should be put aside for education, enhancing teacher training. Where would you say we are on that?
Okay, first of all, we said 20%. 2017 budget was 6% for education. So that's already a failure.
And that's firmly in this
where we
control.
started, and I know we're not summarizing everything, but I don't think anything is going to happen with the education until the minister, Adamu, is removed. Even the state minister is not any better. So it's just a dead end. Going to putting new universities as a promise, that is a joke, right? Because even our current universities are a disgrace. In terms of promises for education, from the minister, it's a joke. From the budget, it's a joke. Nothing is going to change in our educational system. I have, with Okada Books, we hire designers, right? All the people that we've hired as developers are self-taught developers. I sat down and I asked somebody and I said, what are they teaching in your polytechnic? And they're teaching them C++. The students in the United States of America at age 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, they're already doing PHP, Java program, they are making Android, but our university students are teaching them C++. So where are we going?
Do you have any better news for us?
Well, I will put it more delicately.
Yeah.
Delicate one. This, again, I'm saying this because by the end of this year into next year, we're going to start campaigning for elections again. And we really need the people to be demanding things of those who want to run the country. These education promises are not education promises.
What are they?
They are school promises. We don't know the difference between education and schooling.
Okay.
So these are promises to improve schooling. Let's give you more schools. Let's spend more. Education is more than going to school. Education, for me, you see, a lot of these things, you can't have people in government who do not have empathy for the plight of the citizens. You need education, not school, to get out of poverty. Educating people is what? It's an attitudinal thing. It's about, I was luckily educated. The evidence of an educated mind versus an uneducated mind is one thing and one thing alone, the ability to ask questions.
Okay, but I'm going to ask a question now, because I'm educated. See?
Exactly. No, the answer is not the education, it's the question.
Well, but the question is, I hear you on this, but for us to get from point A, which is where we are, to point B, which is where you're saying we should go, there's certain things that should be put in place.
Yes.
And one would assume that saying, for instance, you're enhancing teacher training, you're developing curricula, you're doing this, you're doing that. Shouldn't that be the bridge, so to speak, or the road?
I was blessed to attend National Education Summit where we sat down and we helped them rewrite their curriculum. Nothing we did happened. It was just a joke. We did it and they were nodding their heads and everything. And I know on good record that when this administration took over, they called all the influential educational people to do a presentation for the minister.
Yes.
And he just looked there and just walked out and he didn't ask any questions or anything. Nothing. He just looked at it. He just looked at it. So those are the things. So what do we need to do? This is what I suggest to people, and this is what I tell the people that work for me. On Okada Books is I provide my own water, borehole, my own electricity generator. So stop waiting for the government to give you. Our educational system in the next 4, 5, 6 years is not going to change. It is the reality and it is just truth. And we need to come together and say, okay, how can we solve education outside of the government?
You know, I chuckled when you were talking about bypassing, because in no other sector, I think, than power have we had to bypass so much as a way of life, you know. And the incoming administration, when they were incoming, made some promises, give priority to providing electricity, okay. Steady power supply within the next 12 to 18 months, notable change within 6 months, gas availability for power plants, accelerated training of human resources for the power sector, alternative sources of power, and then generate, transmit, and distribute from the current 5,000 to 6,000, which, you know, to at least 20,000 megawatts of electricity within 4 years. They were very ambitious promises. And I think that was one of the areas in which almost immediately after, you know, we started to see a backtrack. Where are we?
Oh, we're nowhere. I mean, like we said, we hope NEPA doesn't take light in the middle of this interview. It's been terrible, but this is one of the few times I would say it is not this administration's fault. The privatization that happened, people assume that it was like the telco situation where you just buy the Genco disc and then you just put money and you start cashing out. People don't understand the capital intensity. That's not the right word, but how capital intensive power generation is and distribution is. Even if you're able to generate the power, the distribution is expensive. We can't even get enough meters. That's the current issue right now. If Ben Murray Bruce made us a statement about it in the National Assembly, we can't even get enough meters for us to legally charge people. If you really want to charge people the actual value of money, the money is going to be
I have been told that, I have had that conversation, that if we're to charge the real value, it would be out of reach of the common man. But what would you say?
Well, because I have friends in the power sector that are very knowledgeable and I interact with them, I know there's a lot of complexity that does not meet the eye. I understand that and I appreciate it. However, regarding trying to gauge this administration's progress based on their own promise, which is the crux of the matter. At the time you were making this promise, is it that you did not know all these things? Were you that ignorant of reality? Were you that far removed from the plight of the people that you now come in and say, oh gosh, I didn't, I refuse to accept that because, as we say, the internet doesn't forget. I was excited that Fashola became the Minister of Power because as the outgoing governor of Lagos, he had solutions to the power problem. I saw firsthand what he did in Lagos regarding bypassing, but government bypassing, I'm fine with that. But did he do stuff in Lagos regarding power? Yes. At national level, why is he crippled? Doesn't make sense.
Can we argue that the national framework where power is concerned is a totally different animal, so to speak?
Didn't they know that?
Yes, and
Didn't they know that?
But the thing that blows my mind is that they took Fashola and they gave him power. Then they gave him
Works.
Then they gave him
housing.
It's I don't want to call someone, but it's stupidity.
They were setting him up.
Power is
Did it
something.
save his life?
Huh?
Will it save his life?
I don't think so.
Okay, just check.
It's going to ruin his reputation. It's going to, because they've given him an impossible task to fulfill. You need somebody that is 100% dedicated on power.
We'll cap this conversation on this. Now, the entire aim of this conversation is for us to give young people an opportunity to reevaluate how we perceive government. To us sitting down here, I mean, we're not in government, but we have an understanding of how things should be. What would you say to the average young Nigerian as regards how we approach? What would your closing words be to that person who's going to be watching and listening?
So, in closing, short closing, one thing you said is, can I borrow that my overlapping one sentence?
It's too
I've
late.
taken it.
It's gone.
Okay. So one thing is be involved in the process of electing leaders. Go and register, get your PVC, be involved. That is the beginning of the process. Be involved in reading, criticizing, understanding the manifesto of the parties and educate yourself. All of the education I'm referring to, all of it is outside the brick walls of a school. Educate yourself. Why is this person better than that person? How can you come and claim to change the economy of my local government or state or country when you ran a business and it became bankrupt? Ask questions. What are you bringing to the table? How does it affect me? Do you understand what my problem is? I go by a bus, I use a pit latrine. Do you know in 2017 there are pit latrines in Ikoyi, not to talk of other places? Yes. Educate yourself so that and ensure and enforce you engage. Force leadership to engage. And lastly, this is something the young people, because over the years we've been, as the average, all Nigerians are psychologically abused. We do not know how to relate with government, and government does not know how to relate with us. They always relate through intermediaries. For the first time, social media brings us in touch with government, and you see the explosion immediately. Yeah. I'll tell the young people, being respectful does not mean you're subservient. So you engage people in a manner for the purpose of eliciting information. Contradict them, confront them. You don't have to be insultive or rude, which is something my generation and tend to be. But educate yourself, confront them, demand of them, I want to know what your plan is. Not in 2019 or 2020. From now, what is your, I need to hear it, it needs to make sense to me. What is my future? What do you plan for my future? And this is where, when they realize that people are wisening up, they would have to up their game.
This is what I'll tell the Nigerian youths. Democracy doesn't work because you praise the leaders. Democracy works because you criticize the leaders. When you criticize the leaders, step up. If Ronaldo wants to play good soccer. His coach doesn't come and say, you're the best, you're the greatest, that's for the fans. What the coach does is to tell him, this is what you need to improve upon. That's how he improves. In our democracy, we are too prone to praising people. The biggest issue with Buhari, and this is why he's still coasting, is that people still see him as a god for whatever reason, and they praise him. And because of that praising attitude, that's why we haven't yet gotten our democracy. Obama never passed a 60% approval rating. I guarantee you that if they do a Buhari approval rating, he will score 80-90% in some regions that are suffering from poverty. And that's because we still see leaders as gods. It's a cultural thing. So if we need to fix our democracy, we need to understand that criticism is the fundamental part of a democracy. And for our generation, it's not the youth. Our generation has been the most disappointing because our generation is the one that went, brought Buhari, packaged him as change. A military dictator that was president before I was born, brought him in and said he was changed and sold him as the Messiah. All of them have kept quiet. They've disappeared. And those people have to come up and live with that reality. And when 2019 comes up again, we need to make sure, because we're talking about the youth, but we need to make sure that our generation gets up and vets the people that we bring out and say everybody else should vote for.
Gentlemen, I know that we didn't even scratch the surface of all the things that we could have said, but thank you very much. You both, your passion for this country is, it's clear to see. And the truth is, this conversation is not for us to say everything that needs to be said. It's for us to start a conversation that you continue. It's about encouraging you to ask questions, to get educated, to confront things that aren't right, to criticize. If you have the knowledge base to establish that something is not working as it should, then perhaps you have a part to play in making it what it should be. That's what we compatriots are all about. That's what this conversation has been all about. Ask questions, criticize, complain, emphasize, explain, do whatever you have to do, but do something. Thank you so much for listening, and bye-bye.